Have you ever paused to wonder what truly matters when the twilight of life creeps closer, when the years stack up like pages in a well-worn book? I used to think I had it figured out. Aging was just a slow fade, a predictable dimming of the light. But when I crossed the threshold of a nursing home at 81, suitcase in hand and heart heavy with uncertainty, I discovered I was wrong. I expected routine days, quiet corners, and the weight of solitude. Instead, after a year of living among creaking floors, soft voices, and the faint hum of a life I hadn't anticipated, I found something else entirely. Aging is a tapestry woven with surprises, some tender, some jagged, and some so profound they reshape the way you see the world. In this story, I'll share 7 lessons that emerged from my year in this unexpected chapter. Insights carved from the laughter and tears of those I've come to know. From the stillness of early mornings to the clatter of dinner trays. These are lessons that might steady you or someone you cherish as you navigate the winding road of growing older. Some will nod to what you've long suspected, while others might nudge you to rethink the way you imagine your later years. By the time we reach the end, you'll carry a richer understanding of what it means to age with grace, resilience, and a quiet kind of fire. And trust me, stay with me until the final lesson. It's the one that shook me to my core, a truth so potent it might just rewrite the way you approach your own journey through time. If you're new here, I'd love for you to subscribe and tap that bell. Join me as we explore aging, wisdom, and the art of living well. Now let's step into this together. Lesson 1. Loneliness is a choice, not a life sentence. When I first rolled my suitcase through the nursing home's double doors, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and faint echoes of chatter, I braced myself for loneliness. My spouse had slipped away years earlier, leaving a silence that still lingered like a shadow. My children, grown and scattered across busy lives, had their own worlds to tend. Most of my friends from the old days, those who'd shared coffee on porches or danced with me under starlit skies, were either gone or too far to reach. I figured loneliness was the price of growing old, a companion I'd have to accept as I settled into my small room with its beige walls and single window framing a patch of sky. But after a year, I saw something that turned that belief upside down. Loneliness isn't a sentence handed down by time. It's a choice we make or refuse every day. In this place, I've watched 2 kinds of souls unfold. There are those who retreat, curling into themselves like autumn leaves, sitting alone in their rooms with the TV flickering blue across their faces, waiting for a knock that rarely comes. They wear their solitude like a heavy coat, convinced no one cares. Then there are the others, the ones who shuffle down the hall with a nod or a grin, who pull up a chair at a crowded table, who ask, "How's your day been?" even when their own legs ache or their hands tremble. The difference isn't luck or circumstance, it's the spark in their eyes, the decision to reach out. I met a woman named Margaret, who became my teacher in this. She was 83, petite with silver hair, pinned back in a loose bun, her eyes bright, despite the lines etched deep around them. She had no family nearby, no children, no siblings, no visitors to mark the calendar. Yet every morning, she'd wheel herself into the common room, her chair creaking softly, and greet everyone by name. I once found her laughing over a cup of tea with a group of strangers turned friends, her voice lilting with a warmth that drew you in. Curious, I asked her secret. She leaned closer, a mischievous glint in her eye, and said, "I knock on doors, dear. I sit where it's noisy. I don't wait for happiness. I go hunting for it." Her words landed like a pebble in still water, rippling through me. So I tried it. Instead of lingering in my room, staring at the same four walls, I ventured out. I started with a simple "Good morning" to the man who always read the paper by the window. His name was Tom, I learned, and he'd been a mechanic with stories of engines and open roads. I joined a card game in the lounge, fumbling with the rules of rummy I hadn't played since my 40s, laughing as I lost spectacularly to a woman named Clara, who winked and called me a rookie. I asked people about their lives, their childhoods, their triumphs, the names of pets long gone, and each answer stitched me closer to them. My world, once shrunk to the size of my room, bloomed again. I wasn't just marking time, I was weaving a new thread of belonging. Loneliness, I realized, isn't about being alone. It's about staying shut off. There's always a chance to connect, a smile to offer, a story to hear, a hand to shake, if we're brave enough to take it. So if you ever feel that ache creeping in, ask yourself, am I waiting for the world to find me, or am I stepping toward it? Because those who wait often stay lonely, but those who reach out, they find companionship, purpose, and a joy that defies the years. Lesson 2. Independence slips away faster when you let it go. When I first arrived, the nursing home felt like a museum of faded strength. I'd watch residents, people who'd once built homes, raised families, danced through life, lean on walkers, or call for help with tasks they'd done blindfolded in their prime. One man, Richard, stood out to me early on. He was 79, broad-shouldered even now, with hands that looked like they'd wrestled machinery and won. He'd been a farmer, he told me once, his voice gruff with pride as he described hauling hay bales under a blistering sun. But within weeks of settling in, I noticed a shift. He stopped reaching for his own glass of water, asking an aide instead. He let someone else tie his shoes, then fetch his sweater. At first it seemed practical. Why strain when help was there? But months later, his steps grew shakier, his confidence dimmed, and those strong hands trembled more than they gripped. It hit me like a cold wind. When you stop using what you've got, you lose it faster than you'd ever imagine. That lesson sank deep. Independence isn't stolen by age alone. It's surrendered in quiet moments, in the choice to let ease trump effort. I saw it everywhere. A woman who once cooked for a dozen grandkids now waited for every meal to be brought to her. A man who'd driven cross-country let his legs idle until a wheelchair became his world. The pattern was clear. Every time you trade "I can" for someone else will, you chip away at your own power. And once it's gone, clawing it back feels like climbing a mountain with no peak in sight. So I made a pact with myself. If I can do it, I will. No excuses, No shortcuts, even when my knees creak or my back protests. Each morning, I rise from my narrow bed, the mattress sagging slightly under years of use, and dress myself, buttoning my shirt with fingers that sometimes fumble, pulling on socks with a stubborn tug. I shuffle to the kitchenette down the hall, the linoleum cool under my slippers, and pour my own coffee, savoring the steam curling up from the mug. I take the stairs when my legs allow, counting each step like a small victory. 7 up, 7 down, my breath a little sharper at the top. I move, I stretch, I carry what I can, not to prove a point, but to hold tight to the me I've always been. It's not glamorous. Some days, it's just me standing in my room, swaying side to side to keep my balance, or walking the hall to feel my muscles wake up. But those tiny acts, they're my rebellion against the slow slide. Aging doesn't snatch independence in one fell swoop. It nibbles away in choices that seem small. Take the elevator, sit instead of stand. Let someone else lift what you could. Over weeks, months, years, those moments pile up, and suddenly you're someone who needs instead of someone who does. I've seen folks give it up without a fight, not realizing what they're losing until it's too late. So if you're still out there, living on your own terms, don't let convenience rob you blind. Move your body, stretch your limits, lift what you can, keep doing it, because the day you stop is the day you start sliding toward a place where everything's done for you, and trust me, that's a place you don't want to call home. If you're finding these insights stirring something in you, drop a number 2 in the comments. I'd love to know you're with me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and ring the bell. Your support keeps this journey alive. Lesson 3. Health fades when routine falls apart. When I first settled into the nursing home, the days felt like a blur of unfamiliar faces and unscheduled hours. I'd wake to the soft clink of breakfast trays being wheeled down the hall, the murmur of voices drifting through my door, but there was no rhythm to it, at least not one I'd made my own. I started watching the people around me, curious about why some seemed to glow with life while others dimmed like candles burning low. At first, I chalked it up to luck or genetics. Some bodies just held up better, I thought. But over the months, as I sipped lukewarm coffee in the dining room or sat by the window watching sparrows flit across the lawn, I saw the real difference: routine. Take George, a man I met in my second week here. He was 88, a retired school teacher with a wiry frame and a shock of white hair that stuck out like a dandelion gone to seed. Every morning, rain or shine, he'd rise at 6:30 sharp. I'd hear the creak of his bed frame through the thin wall we shared. He'd shave with an old-fashioned razor, the scrape of it audible if you passed his door, then button up a crisp shirt as if he was still heading to a classroom. By 7 o'clock, he'd be out for a walk. Nothing grand, just a slow loop around the courtyard, his cane tapping a steady beat on the pavement. Back inside, he'd settle with a book, maybe a biography or a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, his glasses perched low on his nose. He had a schedule: meals, chats with friends, a stretch or two in the afternoon, and he stuck to it like glue. George was sharp as a tack, his eyes bright with curiosity, his voice steady when he'd recount a tale from his teaching days. He had a presence, a quiet command that made you lean in. Then there were others, folks with no anchor to their days. They'd sleep until noon if they felt like it, the curtains drawn tight against the sun. Meals came and went. Sometimes they'd eat, sometimes they wouldn't bother. Their rooms became caves, the air stale with disuse, and the hours melted into a grey haze. I'd see them in the lounge occasionally, slumped in chairs, eyes glazed as the TV droned on, their energy leaking away like water through a cracked cup. The contrast was stark. George thrived while they faded, not because of age alone, but because they'd let structure slip through their fingers. I learned fast that the body and mind crave order. Without it, everything unravels. Muscles soften, thoughts blur, days lose their edges. So I built my own rhythm. Every morning, I rise at 7 o'clock, the alarm's soft beep pulling me from dreams. I splash cold water on my face, feeling the sting wake me up, then dress in clothes that feel like me. A sweater my daughter knit years ago, its wool faded but warm. I eat breakfast at 8 o'clock, oatmeal with a sprinkle of cinnamon, the scent reminding me of home, then walk the hall, counting 50 steps to the window and back. I read in the afternoon, the pages rustling under my fingers, and step outside when the weather allows, letting the breeze brush my cheeks. I chat with the same folks at the same times, Tom at 10 o'clock, Clara after lunch, keeping those threads alive. It's not about filling time, it's about staying tethered to life. I have seen the cost of letting go. People who once danced or gardened or cooked for crowds now shuffle or sit, not because they can't, but because they stopped giving themselves a reason to try. Routine isn't just habit, it's the scaffolding that holds you up. Those who cling to it stay stronger, sharper, more themselves. So if you want to keep your fire burning, build a plan and hold fast to it. It's the small, daily beats, waking, moving, connecting, that keep you whole. Lesson 4. Your attitude paints your world. I walked into the nursing home with a rookie's assumption. The happiest people would be the ones with the easiest lot, the ones who could still stride down the hall without a cane, who greeted a steady stream of visitors whose bodies hadn't betrayed them yet. I was dead wrong. Some of the healthiest residents I met carried a storm cloud wherever they went, their voices sharp with complaints about lukewarm soup or a chair that wasn't quite right. They'd sit by the window, staring out at a world they felt owed them more, their faces etched with what they'd lost: youth, freedom, the life they'd known. Meanwhile, the brightest spirits I found were often the ones with the heaviest loads. Eleanor taught me this. She was 86, a slight woman with hands gnarled by arthritis, each joint swollen and stiff like knotted wood. She moved slowly, her wheelchair whispering against the floor. But her smile, oh that smile, could light up the dimmest room. Every morning, she'd roll into the dining hall, her voice soft but sure, as she asked, "How's your coffee today?" or "Did you sleep well?" She'd linger over her tea, savoring it like a fine wine, and share a kind word with anyone who'd listen. I once asked her how she stayed so bright when her body gave her so much grief. She chuckled, her eyes crinkling, and said, Happiness isn't what happens to you, darling. It's how you choose to see it. I could count the aches, or I could count the faces around me. I picked the faces. That stuck with me because I'd met others, people with far less to bear, who let bitterness paint their days black. There was a man, Henry, in his late 70s, still spry enough to walk unaided, his hearing sharp, his memory intact. Yet he'd grumble endlessly about the past he couldn't reclaim, the friends who didn't call, the youth he'd left behind. He'd sit alone, nursing his regrets, blind to the laughter bubbling just a table away. The truth hit me hard. Aging hands us all losses, but what we focus on shapes the life we live. I test this every day. When my knees ache, or the mirror shows a face I barely recognize, I could dwell on what's gone. The summers I ran barefoot, the nights I danced until dawn. Instead, I look for what's still here. The warmth of a blanket across my lap, the sound of a friend's voice, the taste of apple pie on a quiet afternoon. I can mourn what's hard or marvel at what's possible. Attitude isn't a gift, it's a muscle, one you flex by choosing gratitude over grievance. The happiest folks I've met aren't the ones with perfect health. They're the ones who wake up hunting for light, no matter how faint. If you start your day expecting shadows, you'll find them. But if you seek a glimmer, even the smallest one, you'll carry it with you. It's that simple and that powerful. If these words are resonating, let me know. Drop a number 4 in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, join us. Hit that button and ring the bell so we can keep exploring together. Lesson 5. Family visits wane, but friendships anchor you. When I first moved in, I pinned my hopes on family visits like stars in a dark sky. Those early days, when my daughter would breeze through the door with my grandkids in tow, their small hands clutching drawings, their voices a tumble of stories, felt like a lifeline. I'd sit straighter in my chair, the room brighter for their presence, savoring every hug, every "love you, Grandpa." I'd replay those moments for days, counting down to the next. But as the months stretched on, life pulled them away. Work piled up, school schedules tightened, and the 2-hour drive became a hurdle. Weeks slipped by without a call, and that silence stung, a bruise I couldn't ignore. At first, I took it personally, wondering if I'd faded from their priorities. Then, I noticed a pattern. The residents who lived for those visits, who sat by the phone or stared out the window, waiting, were the loneliest. Their days hung heavy with disappointment, each missed call a little cut. But the ones who turned inward, toward the people sharing this space, they had a different glow. That's when I met Albert. Albert was 80, a wiry man with a crooked grin and a laugh that rumbled like distant thunder. His son lived 2 hours away and came maybe once every few months, a quick visit squeezed between obligations. But Albert didn't dwell on it. Every morning, he'd pour coffee from the communal pot, its bitter steam curling up, and join a trio of friends at a wobbly table in the corner. They'd trade stories, some true, some stretched, over eggs and toast. Afternoons, he'd shuffle cards for a game of gin rummy, his fingers slow but sure, or share a meal with whoever pulled up a chair. He was never alone, never adrift. One day I asked how he kept his spirits up with his son so scarce. He grinned, stirring sugar into his cup, and said, "I stopped counting the visits and started counting the folks who show up every day. These people, they're my crew now." That flipped a switch in me. I stopped staring at the calendar, waiting for my family's next promise, and looked around instead. I started sitting with new faces at meals. Clara, who'd once been a nurse and had a wicked sense of humor. Tom, who'd hum old jazz tunes under his breath. I'd check on my neighbor, Mrs. Evans, whose arthritis kept her room-bound some days, bringing her a cup of tea and a bit of gossip. I joined bingo nights, chuckling at my terrible luck, and found myself laughing more than I had in years. The less I leaned on far-off visits, the less empty I felt. Family matters, don't get me wrong. My kids love me, and I feel it in the calls that do come, the letters scrawled in crayon from my grandkids. But their lives spin on, and that's not a failing. It's just the way of things. Friendships, though, they're the steady pulse here. I've seen it time and again. Those who wait for kin often sink into longing, while those who build bonds where they stand, they flourish. Love isn't just blood. It's the ones who share your coffee, your stories, your days. And more often than not, they're the ones who keep you afloat. Lesson 6. The past sharpens, but the present still beckons. One of the strangest gifts of growing older is how the past sneaks up on you, vivid and alive, while the present sometimes blurs at the edges. I can close my eyes and smell my mother's kitchen from 70 years ago. Fresh bread rising in the oven, a hint of cinnamon drifting from a simmering pot, the wood floor creaking under her steady steps. I hear the crackle of the radio playing Moonlight Serenade, my father's low hum joining in as he polished his shoes by the sink. I feel the sting of gravel under my bare feet as I raced my best friend, Tommy, down a dusty lane, his wild laughter chasing me to the finish. But ask me what I ate for supper last night, chicken or fish, soup or salad, and I'll pause, squinting into the fog of yesterday, piecing it together like a half-forgotten dream. It's not just me. Around the nursing home, the past spills into every conversation. Over lukewarm tea in the lounge, voices light up with tales of first jobs, typewriters clacking, factory whistles shrieking, or young love, all shy glances and stolen kisses under oak trees. We linger there, in those bright, bold yesterdays, because they're safe, solid, a place where we were whole and the world made sense. But I've learned there's a shadow to that comfort. If you sink too deep into what was, you risk losing what is. I met Frank, 89, a man with a memory like a steel trap for the old days. He'd sit in his armchair, hands folded over a belly that hinted at years of hearty meals, and spin stories of his time as a truck driver, hauling lumber across state lines, the rumble of the engine under him, the endless ribbon of highway stretching out. His eyes would gleam, his voice rich with detail, but that's where he stayed. He rarely left his room, didn't join the card games or the sing-alongs, never asked about the lives unfolding around him. It was as if the present was a ghost he couldn't see, his life already filed away in the rearview mirror. Then there was Helen, 84, a woman with a quick smile and a knack for balancing yesterday and today. She'd reminisce too about her days as a seamstress, the whir of her Singer sewing machine, stitching dresses for prom nights and weddings. But she didn't stop there. She'd try the new pudding flavor at lunch, her spoon tapping the bowl as she declared it not bad, or ask me about my grandkids with genuine curiosity lighting her face. Once, as we sat by the window watching rain streak the glass, she said, "I've got more yesterdays than tomorrows, but that doesn't mean today's just a leftover. It still counts." Her words hung in the air, simple and true. She was right. The past is a treasure chest, every memory a gem that reminds me who I've been, what I've built, the love and grit that carried me here. But if I live only there, I miss the chatter over breakfast, the way the sun slants through the blinds, the chance to hear Clara's latest joke or share a quiet nod with Tom. So I let myself wander back, smiling at the echo of my mother's voice or Tommy's grin. But I don't stay. I keep one foot in the now, because no matter how many years pile behind me, this moment still hums with life. Nostalgia's a gift, but the present's a pulse. Don't let it slip by while you're looking over your shoulder. If this is striking a chord, drop a number 6 in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't subscribed, join us. Hit that button and ring the bell so we can keep sharing these stories. Lesson 7. Small joys weave the richest life. As the years pile up, your world shrinks. No grand expeditions to far-off lands, no career peaks to scale, no milestones that shake the earth beneath you. What's left are the quiet beats of the everyday, the clink of a spoon against a bowl, the shuffle of slippers on tile, the soft routines that fill the hours. At first, I thought that meant life would feel smaller, less alive. But after a year in this place, I've discovered a truth that humbles me. The smallest pleasures hold the deepest power. I see it in Harold, 82, a man with a mop of grey curls and a grin that creases his whole face. He keeps a tin of butterscotch candies in his dresser, the wrappers crinkling as he fishes one out with shaky fingers. Every time I stop by his room, its walls lined with faded photos of his kids and a fishing boat he once captained. He offers me one, his eyes twinkling like it's a grand gesture. "Best part of my day," he'll say, popping one in his mouth, the sweet tang melting into a smile. It's nothing to most, a penny candy, a fleeting taste, but to Harold, it's a ritual, a thread of joy woven into the fabric of his hours. He savors it, shares it, and somehow it's enough to light him up. I have learned to seek those threads myself. There's the first sip of tea each morning, hot and earthy, curling steam around my nose as I cradle the mug in both hands. The birds outside my window, a chorus of chirps and trills that greet me when I crack the sash, their wings a fleeting blur against the sky. The familiar cadence of voices in the hall, Clara's teasing lilt, Tom's gravelly, "Morning, friend," a quiet music that says I'm not alone. When life slows to this gentle pace, these moments rise like stars in a dusk sky, small but brilliant. And I've seen it again and again. The ones who notice them, who linger over a warm biscuit, who hum along to an old tune on the radio, who bask in a patch of sunlight by the window, are the ones who stay content, no matter how the years weigh. But there's another side. I've watched folks who turn away from these gifts, their eyes fixed on what's lost, the trips they can't take, the feasts they can't stomach, the strength that slipped away. They tally the absences, and the more they count, the emptier their days grow. Bitterness seeps in, a slow poison, until even the sun feels like an insult. I've been tempted there myself, mourning the legs that once climbed hills or the hands that kneaded dough without a tremble. But then I taste the tea, hear the birds, feel the wool of my sweater against my skin, and I'm pulled back. Happiness isn't always a thunderclap. It's a whisper in the steam, a laugh over a shared candy, a breath of peace in a noisy world. So wherever you are, pause. Find one small thing right now, a scent, a sound, a touch that sparks even a flicker of gladness. Hold it close, because in the end, it's not the big wins that stitch a life together. It's these tiny joys, gathered like wildflowers, that make each day worth waking to. Final thoughts. Aging is a choice. We live every day after a year in this nursing home, surrounded by the hum of wheelchairs and the clatter of trays. I've learned that aging isn't just the body winding down, it's how we meet the years we're given. Independence fades if we let it, but every step we take, every shirt we button, keeps it alive a little longer. Loneliness looms, but it's a shadow we can chase away by reaching out, by choosing connection over retreat. Routine isn't busy work. It's the heartbeat that keeps mind and muscle strong. Attitude is the lens we wear. Focus on the cracks and life fractures. Seek the light and it shines through. Family may drift with the tides of life, but friendships, those steady hands at the next table, hold us up. The past glows brighter with every year, but the present still calls, asking us to show up. And those small pleasures, the coffee, the laughter, the sun through the glass, they're the threads that weave joy into the everyday. If there's one truth I'd press into your palms, it's this: life doesn't end when the scenery shifts. There's still room to grow, to connect, to find a quiet happiness if we're willing to lean into it. Aging isn't a surrender, it's a series of choices, small and mighty, that shape the story we leave behind. Thank you for walking this path with me today. I'd love to hear your voice. Drop a comment below with one lesson that hit home, or how you'll carry it forward. Your thoughts fuel this journey, and reading them lights me up. If this stirred something in you, give it a like, subscribe, and share. It keeps us going, crafting stories to inform and inspire. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.